Hello, my friend, and welcome to the Sales Podcast. This is Wes Schaeffer, the Sales Whisperer, your host. As I mentioned when I did the Traction book review, that coming up next would be Pitch Anything. This is by Oren Klaff. I had Oren on the Sales Podcast back on episode 142, and be sure to check that out. I'm probably going to have him on again. You know, I'm kicking myself. I first read this book around late 2011, which is right around the time it came out, and it was powerful. I mean, I underlined a ton of that book, and I'm just bummed that I did not reread it almost weekly since then. It really is that good. This guy has changed how, I don't know if he changed how to sell, but he's documented it in a way that I haven't seen anybody else do. And I've been a student of the game. I've been a student of sales and persuasion since at least 1994. I was still in the Air Force and actually I got involved with a network marketing company this guy introduced me to when I was stationed here in Southern California. So I started getting into, Tom Hopkins and Tony Robbins and Brian Tracy, and I mean, all the usual suspects, right? Read Donald Trump's with the Art of the Deal, and I mean, I have a full library. I've given books away. I've sold them. I've got digital copies. It's just everywhere you look are books. But I realize I'm not going through them enough. And rather than get a bunch of new things, let's go back to the old and the reliable. But, Oren, he's documented this, and the things he has done are current. Okay, he's still very much alive and well. He's a young guy making things happen. He now teaches sales and sales training. But he was doing deals here in Southern California as raising money as a venture capitalist, doing big deals, tens of millions of dollars. He ends the book with a story on $1 billion proposal that he won, and how he gets into the mind of the prospect. I just haven't seen anybody do as succinctly. Right, I've read books on psychology and persuasion and mind reading. I had Ian Rowland on. Great interview. Go check him out. He's still one of the top downloaded episodes. We talk about mind reading. And is it true? Can you use it in sales? So I've read people in multiple genres, right? But he just brings it all together. And he talks about how he basically Oren created this neurofinance, getting into the mind of the prospect. And one of the big things, so as I went through this book, and it's 218 pages before you get to the index, and I mean, I just kept underlining. Even though I had already underlined a bunch, I found myself continuously underlining and say, okay, this is getting ridiculous. It's almost like I underlined the entire book. But again, if you go and read it, I recommend you read it, you need to not multitask. You need to slow down. You need to apply what you're learning. It's not enough to learn something. You have to apply it. And even though I got through the book pretty quickly, as far as pure reading time, it's an easy read. But I would stop and I would take notes, and I'm already applying things. Yesterday, I had a call with a prospect, and I used Oren's opening. And it's interesting. I'm happy in a way because, and I'll tell you a couple of stories from my past that jive with what he's saying. But I was doing them instinctively. Now I'm seeing how to do it intentionally and how to train my clients even deeper. My one-on-one clients, I go on site with small businesses and do their training. I've got the Make Every Sale course. So I'm always trying to get better, and I'm happy and readily admit when either I'm wrong or there's a better approach, right? Not necessarily wrong, because obviously what I've been doing has worked. I've sold successfully since, full-time since 1997, but you can always get better, right? I mean, even Tiger Woods, he's had his ups and downs, but after he first won the Masters, I think it was 96. I think it was when he won it the first time. And he was young, I think 21 years old. He just turned pro. He turned around and reinvented his swing. And he reinvented his swing a couple of times. Yeah, he's got a troubled, private life. But the best are not afraid to change, right? I think the best are the best because they do change. Look at this past national championship. Nick Saban, Alabama Crimson Tide. They were playing Georgia. And I was pulling over Georgia. I'm tired of Alabama beating my LSU Tigers. But Nick Saban, he's the best for a reason. He changed quarterbacks to start the second half. He went to a true freshman. And good thing he did, or they would have lost. And he has done that before in other games. I don't think he's done it in national championship. But he's the best because he's not afraid to change. You must embrace change. You must constantly get after it. I think Jack Welch is the one that says, if the change outside is greater than the change within, then the end is near. Okay, things will change. Social media is changing. Facebook, everybody's freaking out right now as I record this because Facebook's changing their algorithms. And just stay after it. Keep doing the right things, right? Keep looking for the right things, testing them, seeing what's working now. The right approach for your business may be different than your competitors or your neighbors, or, maybe you're in real estate and a chiropractor has to do things a little bit differently. But still, keep learning, keep applying yourself, and take notes on this. And again, I recommend you get the book. I've got a link to my Amazon site from the podcast, from the notes. So, I ask you to please visit the site, click on that link. Amazon will give me a few nickels. It's a way you can support the podcast, and it doesn't cost you anything, right? It's the same price whether you click on my link or not. But at a very high level, let me explain what's going on here. In Oren's, in his book, in his studies, and in his experience, he talks about the three levels of the brain. And I've talked about the lizard brain. I've talked about the neocortex. I've spoken about things like that. I talk about surprising Broca, which is an area in the brain that it's near the ear, actually. And so sound is very important. Even when we're reading, we're taking the words and we're sounding them out in our brain. So that may be news to you, but that's why, a picture is worth 1,000 words. That's why, what picture would replace the Our Father or the Gettysburg Address? Those two combined are less than 1,000 words. So words still mean things. And so we're bouncing those words around in our brain. There's a part of the brain, the Broca's area. He doesn't talk about that in the book. That's just from my own studies. But it's kind of a traffic cop. And it's looking for what's unique and interesting. But Oren talks about the primitive brain, okay, calls it the crocodile brain. That's your fight or flight. Okay, your strong emotions are there. Our prospects are receiving our message, our pitch, in their crocodile brain, okay? But we have formulated our pitch in what they call the neocortex, which is the higher part of the brain. It's literally the last part, the most recent part to have developed. So we're super smart and experienced in our field. We know the pros and cons. We know the features and benefits. And so we give this very high-level esoteric discussion, but it's like a PhD speaking to a fifth grader, right? And we overwhelm the prospect. And so they shut down because that limbic system, right, that crocodile brain, that's the fight or flight. Its main job is to say, is this new? Is this interesting? Is this a threat? Okay? And its job is to conserve energy in the owner, because it still thinks, that lizard brain part of us, that crocodile brain, still thinks there's saber-toothed tigers out there trying to kill us. And it's already been documented, it's confirmed, so it just run with it. Okay? You are talking too much. You are giving much more detail. I'll get into this later on. He talks about hot cognition and cold cognition. He talks about how to handle your analytical types that are just cold, just all facts. But you've got to bring out the hot cognition in the prospects. It's just like dating. It's just like courtship. You've got to elicit those reactions, and you cannot do that in the neocortex. You must understand what makes people tick and how they process information. You need to keep this short and sweet. And I've written about this over the years, the new ABCs of selling. I talk about always be courteous, always be curious, but another one is always be concise. And I'll link to that in the show notes. But, I was doing this back in 1993. It was on September 1993. I got stationed in Osan, Korea. And I was the new weather officer there. And there was a little bit of an overlap with this lieutenant I was replacing. Good old Leonard. Very nice guy, but he was kind of geeky. He was nerdy. There were a lot of nerds in the weather field. It's a hard science. But he warned me. Twice a day we had to go brief the F-16 pilots across the base. And he warned me, right? Oh, this is so hard. This is so hard. They're going to grill you. They're going to skewer you. Just be ready. So, I prepare this very long, in-depth brief, notes and details on everything, takeoff weather, landing weather, weather to target, 12 hours, 24 hours, sea temperature, on and on and on. But I knew that there were only three things they really needed, right? Takeoff, landing, target, weather. That's it. And so I gave them that, and it literally took 45 seconds, under a minute for sure. And I said, any questions? And they were like, no, Lieutenant, thank you. And I step off the stage. And on the drive back, I was talking to Leonard, why was that so hard? What's the big deal? And then as I got to know the pilots, I realized he would give them this 5 or 10 or 15-minute briefing. And it was required, right? It was required by Air Force regulations that all pilots get a weather briefing before they fly. It said nothing in there about how long that briefing had to be. Now, I was prepared to give a 5 or 10 or 15-minute briefing. I had all the facts. I had all the data. But just like in dating, you don't just run up to someone and give them your whole life story. You got to make eye contact, smile a little bit, maybe you dance a little bit, share a drink. You slowly release a little bit of interesting information. Let them pull it out of you. See if they're really interested in you. It's the same thing. And I've always done this in business. I've done it in sales. I'd rather give a little and have them ask than give a lot and bore them. It's how I've sold hundreds and hundreds of Infusionsoft and now HubSpot and Entreport accounts. People talk to me about how they give 45-minute, 1 hour, 2 hour presentations, how they'll give 2 hour presentations, days or weeks apart. It's just dragging them down. And I'm like, man, I get 1 and 2 call closes, and they're all very short demos. I wrote the book on Infusionsoft. The first time was almost 700 pages. I understand the software, but it doesn't mean I have to speak to the prospect and read 700 pages of data for them to make a decision. Okay, I realized that my neocortex, when it came to sales and marketing automation software, was too advanced for the average prospect. So I speak to their crocodile brain, that lizard brain. We boil that thing down to its core, to its essence. What are the main problems you're trying to solve? Okay, does this solve your problem? Yes. Does it have a positive ROI? Yes. Then go ahead and buy. Then the 2,647 extra features are just what we call in the South lagniappe, baby. That's lagniappe. Gravy, right? That's extra. That's icing on the cake because you've already solved the problem. So you need to understand how to boil your pitch, your presentation, your offer, boil it down to its core. And again, he talks about this $1 billion deal. And they prepared for months to do this deal. And it was all about what could he carve out, what could he take out of his presentation. And I think he got it down, I don't know if I can find it real quick. He got it down to maybe 25 minutes. This was for $1 billion, going up against big firms that went for an hour or more. Right? He left them wanting more. And then, sure enough, they asked questions. They were involved. They were engaged. He had elicited that response in them. Like I said, I did this just yesterday. And for the longest time, I've had short meeting links. I have a 15-minute link. I have a 25-minute link and a 50-minute link. So and usually by default, somebody wants to meet, I give them a 15-minute link. There's no reason to talk forever. But I got on the call. A friend set this call up, and just like Oren recommends, no chit chat, no how's the weather, blah blah blah. It's like, hey, gentlemen, I'm glad I could find some time for us to meet. Look, I've got another call in 20 minutes, so is it okay if we just get started? And look, I get it. I'm from the South. Just came back from 8 days in Alabama and Florida. I surprised my dad for his 70th birthday. You should have seen the look on his face. So that was pretty cool. So people are accustomed to small talk. I get it. But in a business setting, it does not add value. And in sales, you are putting yourself in what Oren calls the beta position. It's a beta trap, right? Meaning an alpha and a beta. There's the alpha, there's the leader of the pack, and there's a beta. There's followers. And I've always said, the first product I ever created in the Sales Whisperer was the 7 Deadly Sins of Selling. And one of them, I talk about how you see yourself as a beggar instead of as a peer, instead of as an equal. Yes, you may be meeting with somebody rich and powerful, running a big company, but if you're the expert, you're trying to be their chiropractor, you're trying to be their IT person, you're trying to be their web designer. You know more about those fields than that person. And the core concept, the main tenet that Oren gets into is talking about frames and frames colliding, and how the more powerful frame, the alpha frame, gobbles up, just like a black hole sucking in a smaller black hole. The alpha frame gobbles up and consumes the smaller, less powerful frame. But in that certain situation, you can elevate your status to have more power in that sales situation. But you need to understand the beta traps. He talks about having, a receptionist. Hey, sign in, put this name tag on, go sit in the lobby, be a good boy, drink some cold coffee out of a styrofoam cup. When the alpha is ready, we will summon you, a beta boy. All right, and you go into the conference room, and then they're running late, and they make you wait. It's more alpha positioning. How do you take control when everything is stacked against you? Okay, because there is always a game. A sale is always being made. When two or more people meet, a sale is made. You've heard me say that over and over again. Frames are colliding. You show up to Applebee's for their little happy hour, right? You got to sign in. You got to all stand in line or squish your butts on the little bench there in the front. You got to only order off of the menu, and only from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. and no exclusions allowed. So those are beta traps, right? They're positioning you so to where they benefit. Now, yeah, you might benefit. Hey, the beers are $1 off, and 2-for-1 appetizers, so you're happy. So there's pros and cons, right? But when you're trying to make that sale, you're trying to position yourself as an equal or even the superior on that topic. You cannot fall for these beta traps. Your frame must become the most powerful frame in that room and consume the other alphas, right? Trying to keep you down. So again, you got to understand, there's always a game. There's always a sale being made. It's like in poker. If you don't know who the sucker is, it's you. So you can say, I'm not in sales, and, that feels manipulative. You know what? We're all in sales. Every time two or people meet, and you either control the situation so you're not manipulated, or you will be controlled and manipulated. That is all there is to it. Again, it applies when you're at Applebee's. It applies when you're buying a car. It applies when you're haggling over furniture. So it just is. So either welcome that and acknowledge it, or be comfortable with second place. But because you're listening to this, I know you're not satisfied with second place. All right. Now, believe it or not, I'm only on page 8 of this book, although I have pulled forward quite a bit. It's crazy. It's good. It's powerful. You gotta get into this. He opens up, Oren does, with talking about how he's not a natural. He had to really apply himself and learn the science, the methodology behind the art of the sale. And so that's good news for all of us, right? It means you can learn the same things. You can learn how to become a better salesperson. I've always said this. My very first paid client doing sales training when I started the Sales Whisperer was an architect that was leaving his firm to go out on his own. But because he was very process-oriented and could follow instructions and was motivated, he was hungry, right? He had to succeed. He did succeed. So you can follow systems and processes and succeed at sales. And not only that, I think you have to follow systems and processes to succeed at sales. You can only wing it for so long. Again, the 7 deadly sins of selling. Number 1, I call it Annie Oakley-itis. If you remember Annie Oakley, she was a trick shot artist, right? She could shoot from the hip. You and I are not Annie Oakley. And so the reality, behind the scenes is that she practiced like crazy to shoot from the hip. So she wasn't literally just walking out there, picking up a gun and saying, hey, let me see if I can hit the target from this angle. She practiced that so many times so she could hit it. You're probably not doing that. Okay? So you need to understand, he talks about framing, right? Frames create context and relevance. As we will see, the person who owns the frame owns the conversation. It's interesting how he uses this word frames, and I've seen this now after a year in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. We talk about framing. When a person comes to attack, especially when you fall down, right, and they're trying to get what they call side control. They're passing your guard. They're getting away from your legs and getting up to control your neck and lay on you. We frame that person. We frame them with bones. We frame them with an elbow and a forearm rather than our hands. Okay, because you can get your wrist locked and tap out, but also because you're using muscles. Whereas if you can frame the person, if you can get a knee in, put a knee on their hip, put a foot on their hip, put your forearm across their throat. If they've mounted you, you put your both hands on one hip and turn. You're framing that person. And when you control the frame, you can control the fight, even if you're on the bottom. That's the crazy thing with jiu-jitsu is that typically, you see a guy, a street fight on YouTube or cops or something, the guy on the bottom is losing. In jiu-jitsu, they teach you how to be calm and comfortable and how to attack from the bottom. And it's by controlling framing. And when you're attacking, you have to defeat those frames. You want to remove the frame so that you can apply more pressure. So, sales and negotiation is the same thing. You're trying to control the frame. You're trying to control the space. You're trying to control the timing. It's all the same, right? So, but, he opens up with, he goes in with a buddy who was super prepared, meeting a very important guy who just disrupted everything with 2 questions. Bam. He just got the guy on his heels. And so, he calls that the presenter's problem. Okay? It's when you know too much, when you've prepared. You've prepared for the dog and pony show. You've prepared for the glitz and glamour, but you haven't prepared for the true fight. Okay? Like he says, a great pitch is not about procedure. It's about getting and keeping attention. If you've heard Gary Vaynerchuk at all in the last several years, we are brokering right now for attention. Facebook is brokering for attention. They want your eyeballs. That's why when you run an ad on Facebook and you send them back to your fan page, you pay less money for that click than if you send them to your website. That's why when you have posts that have links that take you somewhere else, it does not get the same reach. That's why I tell people upload a native video to YouTube. If you upload it to YouTube and then include a YouTube link in a post, it won't get the same reach because Facebook doesn't want you leaving their ecosystem. They want your attention. So it's true with Facebook. It's true when telling bedtime stories and teaching kindergarteners. It's true when you're 40 years old pitching a 60-year-old billionaire on a deal. Okay? It's about getting and keeping attention. And that means you have to own the room with frame control. Drive emotions with intrigue pings and get to a hook point fairly quickly. All right, and he gets into those, and I'll try to get into those a little bit here. But, intrigue, again, I talk about dating. When you are intrigued by the person you are pursuing, it creates that interest, right? It creates that hot cognition. You want that person. If they're an open book, whatever. You lose interest. It just is. That's where it comes from, playing hard to get. This is the key. You as the salesperson can and should and need to play hard to get. You must turn the tables. I've always said, look at what your competition is doing and do the opposite. Okay? 99.999 times out of 100, out of 1,000, that's the best way to do it. Although I guess that would be 999.9999. Okay, you know what I mean. You have to be different. You know, I used to end the sales podcast here, you know, with sell different. But it's still true. You must look, act, sound, speak, conduct yourself totally differently from your competition. Because if you look like them, sound like them, act like them, quack like them, then the only way your prospect can determine or differentiate you from your competition is on price. That means you have to negotiate, lower your price, and that's just a mess. It's a mess for everybody. So those intrigue pings, you know, and the hook point, I've talked about this on and off for years. You talk about a tagline or a hook. What does your headline look like? What's that call to action? What's above the fold on your website, on your landing pages? Those are hooks. When you run that ad, the headline matters, the description, the sentence or two right underneath, the call to action, those are all hook points, and they apply just the same when you're pitching, right? When you're face to face with somebody. So you have to figure out, you know, he talks about this intrigue ping. It's a short but provocative piece of information that arouses curiosity. You know, one thing he mentioned as an example here is, by the way, an NFL quarterback is also an investor. Right? So again, he's pitching, you know, multi-million-dollar deals to people. So that could be an intrigue ping. That could be, well, what? You know, oh, by the way, the Infusionsoft Market of the Year uses me for their help. Or, hey, you know this person that used to work with Tony Robbins? Yeah, well, she's come to me to help her business automate, integrate, and dominate. So using little things like that, and it's interesting. I've always sprinkled those in. I just knew it. I don't know. Maybe I knew it intuitively. Maybe I just over years of study and conferences, you know, I've picked it up and just assimilated it. But it's good to have this, right? And so, like he says, I finally got him to the hook point, the place in the presentation where your listeners become emotionally engaged. Okay, they go beyond interested to being involved and then committed. Back when I was selling hardware for this startup out of Austin, we had I wouldn't bring the whole thing because it was a big piece of equipment. And I also sold test equipment, you know, fiber optics and things like that. Gigabit Ethernet when that was a big deal way back in 02, 03, 04. Selling things like that. I would bring pieces of the unit. If it was small, I'd bring the whole thing. But I got in trouble early on. I think I told that story as well about doing a demo on a big expensive piece of equipment, and the demo went great. And a guy was helping me, actually Jordan, who just did the Tampa Bay Frogman swim with me, and he's a little older and a little more experienced and on that technology back then. And so the appointment was going well, and I knew we had a little extra time, and I said, "Yeah, you want to see this, that, and the other, right?" I already showed him A, B, and C. He was happy. Boom, he knew the equipment met his needs. Then I wanted to show him D, E, F, G, H, to L, M, N, O, P. And fortunately, everything worked out. But man, I got a butt chewing from Jordan because, you know, once the sale is made, shut up. And when you're doing a demo, the longer you go, you're just increasing the chances that something will break, even if it's good software, good hardware. Things sometimes glitch out, software, whatever. I mean, so don't do it. But, you know, I would bring, when I was selling these new types of computers, they were standard Intel chips, Seagate hard drive, standard RAM. They were just in a new form factor. So I would bring either a dummy blade, so it was just an old one, but still had all the pieces and parts. We just didn't plug it in. Or I would bring the desktop unit, which was very small. So people could touch it. They could feel it, right? They could become involved. And then that's where I would get the commitment in my presentation. So, and again, some guys gave me some tips about that, but I kind of went against the grain. I would stop doing presentations. I did not bring literature. I learned that from Jordan. You know, you pass out literature, and as soon as you do, you pass this stuff out as soon as you begin, you've lost them. Your prospect's going to be looking at the literature, pushing the buttons. They're not going to be looking at you. It's tough to get them really tight, really hooked on you if they're looking at something else. So be very careful about when you pass out literature and demos, you know, to make sure that you have their full attention. I remember, I think it was Frank Sinatra said, anybody that needs more than a microphone and a spotlight is a chump. Okay, and there's a lot to that. Now, obviously, guys like Steve Jobs was a master of the presentation, but he used very simple slides, big pictures, a little bit of text to convey the message. He would use that just to kind of keep things moving along. I remember I saw Jeffrey Gitomer years ago, 2010 or 2011, I don't know, somewhere in there. He spoke out in Anaheim, and I remember he said, slides are free, add another one. He would never use font, anything smaller than size 48. So slides can be good if you know how to use them, if you use them properly. Multimedia certainly can enhance your presentation or your pitch. But how many of you can do that right? I'd say work on mastering the words, mastering how to engage. Then add your slides, add your multimedia to enhance what you've already created. That's always been my advice as a writer. When I do marketing and writing for clients, I start with the words. Then we sprinkle in the graphics. That's why I'm always hesitant, and I recommend my clients, against getting too involved with these graphic artists and people like that. They start with the artwork and then work backwards. I start with the words. What words are needed to accomplish the goal? And you have multiple stages, right? A, B, C, D, E, attract, bond, convert, deliver, endear. At what stage are we? What is needed to accomplish the goal? Let's get the words. Now sprinkle in the colors and the graphics and the logos. Okay? That's why you see so many struggling, starving graphic artists and whatnot. But I digress. So, all right, so he opens with that story. He really gets this guy's interest. Like he says, the better you are at keeping someone's attention, the more likely that person will be to go for your idea. Okay? Super simple. Simple concept. Making it execute is tough. The example he gives is like telling somebody when you play tennis, hey, hit the ball with topspin when it comes. Yeah, okay. Or golf. Hit the ball with backspin to make it really fly high and stick. Yeah. Easy to explain, very difficult to do. That's what this is. That's why you've got to spend the time to master this. So kudos to you for listening to this, and double kudos if you buy the book from my website. Read this and heed it. Okay. He talks about as well that we are our own worst coach. You've heard me say that it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle. When I got serious about golf, I took a lesson where the guy videotaped me. He recorded me from the top, from the front, from behind. I only hit the ball about 5 times, and we spent the other 30 minutes plus reviewing the video. When I got serious about speaking, I went to a course. They recorded us. We had to go and listen, watch ourselves on a VHS, 2002, 2003 time frame. So we'd watch ourselves. When I was playing football, high school, at the academy, we watched game film. Heck, in college, we'd watch practice film. I mean, they filmed the practice. That's how intense we get. So, but you are your own worst coach. So you tend to overwhelm. I do that. I've done that for years. I've done it in webinars especially. I give too much information. I'm too much in the neocortex and not enough in the lizard brain, the crocodile brain. So, but it's not your fault, right? He talks about that. It's an evolutionary flaw in our brain. He calls it a wiring kludge in our hardware that we must understand and learn to deal with if we are ever going to pitch successfully. So you need to understand how these brains work, the crocodile brain, the midbrain, the neocortex, what each one does. The midbrain I haven't spoken about, but he gets into how that deals with meaning and social, status, relationships. But it goes from survival, up to relationships, and then finally up to problem solving. When you meet with a prospect, even though it may be a nice conference room, fancy coffee, everybody's in a suit, they're still thinking about survival. That's how their brain is working. And you come in there too highfalutin, you're going to be in trouble. And that's why, you're not doing as many deals as you can, as you should. So, because our brains err on the side of extreme caution, Okay, this continues unconsciously to this very day. Every time we encounter something new, okay, it happens whenever we encounter a pitch from someone who wants us to do something. So our brains are saying danger. He says we are hardwired to be bad at pitching. So the neocortex, or the crocodile brain, is saying danger. This person is coming in. They are confusing me. They're making me use too much energy in my brain. I need energy later in case I have to run from a saber-toothed tiger. So ignore this person. Shut down. Save your energy. Danger. So you have to get good at connecting with the brain, intriguing it, right, to capture the attention. You're just literally winging it. You're literally wasting your time if you don't learn this. You're wasting time. You're wasting money. You're wasting your company's money. You're not going to hit your goals if you don't master this. All right, that's what I'm saying. You got to master this. In the here on page 12, he talks about what's going on in the croc brain. Number one, if it's not dangerous, ignore it. If it's not new and exciting, ignore it. If it is new, summarize it as quickly as possible and forget about the details. All right, and he even talks about if you go beyond 20 minutes, even if you've made the connection, if you go too long, they'll check out and then they'll forget what they might have been originally excited about. ABC, always be concise, right? And then finally, do not send anything up to the neocortex for problem solving unless you have a situation that is really unexpected and out of the ordinary. That's why you're failing. That's why your pitches, your presentations, they're not going as well as they could. You've got to understand this framing. You've got to understand how to engage the brain. You've got to understand how different hormones are released. He gets into that towards the end of the book. And again, just like saying, hit the ball with topspin, in tennis, easy to describe, hard to execute. You need to spend time with this. I'm spending time with this. I'm redoing a lot of things that I'm working on, especially verbally. When I set up meetings, fortunately, I've already set the tone with short meetings. I've always had the agenda. If you check out thesalesagenda.com, I've been teaching this for years. I learned this in 2006. I talk about, hey, the reason we're meeting, is to see if there's a fit. I have two ground rules. We're open and honest with each other, and either of us can end the meeting at any time for any reason. So I've been doing that. Later on, he talks about, calling this the prize, making yourself the prize. That's the prize frame. I make myself the prize frame and saying, hey, I'm allowed to, and I will end this meeting for any reason if I see that we're not a fit. So that helps me differentiate myself. So thesalesagenda.com, it's a free handout. Use it. Okay, I create verbal agendas. I email that agenda. I show up in person and review that with everyone in attendance. That has helped me sell successfully for 12 years and more. Okay, you got to master this thing. So again, as we're going through this, you need to make sure that your messaging is very simple, that it's clear, that it's direct, that it's non-threatening. Okay, ideas to decide in our favor. That's what you've got to convey to the prospect. He talks about dopamine, right? If you got something sexy, the latest iPhone, Ferrari, right, Lamborghini, the brain becomes so flooded with dopamine, that any old pitch will do. But unless you have something that's so sexy it's irresistible, you've got to follow these rules. Okay? So again, setting the frame. You must seize the high social status so you have a solid platform from which to pitch. Then you must create messages that are full of intrigue and novelty. He calls it strong. S is setting the frame. T is telling the story. R is revealing the intrigue. O is offering the prize. N is nailing the hook point. And G is getting a decision. So is your pitch strong? Seizing that high social status. He gives an example. Anytime the president walks into a room, he has a social status, right? Whether you like the president or whatever, that's not here nor there. But when the doctor steps in to the hospital for his physical, that doctor owns the social status. Hey, good to see you. Yeah. Secret Service, blah, blah, blah. The nuclear football. Yeah, whatever. Take your clothes off. Take your clothes off. Put this gown on. I'll be back in 5 minutes. Okay. In that setting, the doctor owns it. You can own the social status in a situation, but you need to know what's going on, and you must take it. He tells an interesting story how he did that with a guy eating an apple, and I realized I was doing that without knowing why. I just knew I needed to. I was at a meeting again with Jordan. We were at a CLEC, a competitive local exchange carrier, up in North Houston. I think it was up in the Woodlands, that area. But there were two groups that we were meeting with, and they sat on either end of the conference table. And I was great at setting meetings. I mean, I was relentless. I could get my foot in the door. I took him up to Sprint one, it was like a 2-day trip, and we had like 13 meetings in 2 business days. It blew his socks off. This was early 2002. I remember because we got recruited away by a company in late 2002, and that was one of the things that convinced him what I could do. But anyway, I was great at setting meetings, but this technology was new. It was new to me. It was evolving quickly. The dot-com bubble had burst, so people were really scrambling to land deals. So I set the appointment, had 2 teams in there, and I got up to get everyone some refreshments. They had a Coke machine, so I just went and just bought a bunch of stuff. And I brought it back and set it down on the table. And right about that time, I think I told this story on another episode, but one of the spokesmen for one of the teams said, "Oh yeah, that's not us. You need to be working with them. They're the ones with the budget." And I just put my arm around all of it, just like on Texas Hold'em when the guy wins the whole pot and just puts his arms out and pulls it all in. I just did that with one arm and slid everything away from them towards the guys with the money. And to this day, Jordan tells that story, that team looked so dejected, but they understood. They didn't have the money. So then I took the social status and focused on the others. Okay. And a big thing that Oren gets into in all of this is that you have to sprinkle in some humor. Dan Kennedy talks about it, make them laugh and take their money. But everybody talks about humor being similar to nitroglycerin, right? A little bit goes a long ways, and it's easy to overdo it. And Oren admits that, but he says it shows control, it shows power if in the heat of the moment, when things are tense, when things are tight, when things are competitive, frames are colliding, they're jockeying for position, one's trying to consume and assume the other. If in all of that you have the presence of mind to sprinkle in a little situational awareness, a little quick wit, it helps you gain that social status. So when I did that, it elevated my status. It put those people, it told them to just sit there and be quiet for the rest of the meeting, which they did. Then, of course, we gave it back. Hey, here's some treats. Here's some soda. Here's some chips. And Oren talks about it as well. Once you gain it, you have to then distribute, share that power around the room, include others. Maybe you've got a jerk trying to take things over. You take the power, you dish it out to others, get them on your side, then bring that person in as well. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of mental effort. It's a lot of preparation. But I'm telling you, it works. As I read this, I was happy to see that I was doing a lot of it, that I've done a lot of this over the years. Now I'm just being more conscious, more intentional about it, and adding this into everything that I do in my sales. So keep in mind that if your prospect is bored, confused, or threatened, all those are bad for you. Sounds obvious, but why is it still happening? So moving into chapter 2, he gets into frame control, and he's great at telling stories. I mean, he follows his own, recommendations. He practices what he preaches. And so he talks about going in, locking down this guy. This dude was totally amazed. He says, hey, come do this for me. Because he talks about these frames collide. It's a death match. They collide, and the stronger frame absorbs the weaker. Understanding how to harness and apply the power of frames is the most important thing you will ever learn. Page 22. I mean, I could go on. I could talk about this for 3 days. I'll go a little bit longer. I'm not going to read you the whole book, of course, but go get it. Because this framing, so important. And you see why. You see how kids do this. Boys especially, but kids in general. I mean, we play King of the Hill, right? Who can knock the other one off? Smear the queer. We can't say that anymore. But, I mean, as kids, you throw the ball around and tackle the guy with the ball. And as soon as you get tackled, you had to give it up. So we do that as humans. We do that, it's a pecking order. We're pack animals. I mean, like it or not, you see it in the wild, and you see it in business. But that is basically how you talk about frame control. Okay? He says here, the less you say, the more effective you will be. ABC, always be concise. Oh, I love this. I love this. Sales techniques were created for people who have already lost the frame collision and are struggling to do business from a subordinated or low status position. The sad fact is these methods are typically ineffective and usually end up offending people instead of promoting pleasant, mutually beneficial business. Now, I've got my sales training flashcards. I get into how to use the phone, right, to speak with somebody, to book a call, because you may be working with a company that, that's all they give you, right? You got to make outbound calls. You can't build your own website. You can't blog. You can't create inbound marketing, at least not easily. So you got to work the phone. You need to create intrigue. You need to pique their interest. You need to get through decision makers, through the gatekeepers and reach the decision makers. But none of those are cheesy, pushy sales techniques, right? It's ways to set the hook, set an agenda, set a time to speak later on, state your case, build intrigue, get interest, get the decision. It's none of these overcoming objections. I've never taught the old overcoming objections. I would rather anticipate, address, and prevent the objection from ever coming up than going over cheesy, pushy, slimy techniques where I'm butting heads with them to close the sale. Yes, those can and do work. The problem is, what type of relationship do you create with these people? Are you likely to get referrals and testimonials from somebody you did a hard close on? I don't think you can. At least not a lot. Not as many as you follow this. Set the frame, control the dialogue, set the hook, build intrigue. He talks about, stacking to create this hot cognition. I'll get into that a little bit here before I wrap this up. But if you can do that in a masterful way, you'll have them eating out of the palm of your hand. Okay? Like he says, he's hard on these sales gurus. When you fail to control the social frame, you probably have already lost. Okay? When you're doing the law of large numbers, right? Throw enough crap against the wall, something's bound to stick. They're forcing you to compensate for your weak position with a Herculean effort to win new business, claiming that it's just a numbers game. I love this. He says, it's rather rude of them to give away so much of your life this way, isn't it? So frame-based business takes the opposite approach. It promotes the use of social dynamics, stacking things in your favor before the game even begins. And I noticed this months and months ago. We do these different drills in jiu-jitsu. And it's like either a guard pass or maybe even half guard, where the guy lays down and he grabs one of your legs with his legs. So you're in a half guard. And then you fight, and then whoever, if the guy on the bottom sweeps you, rolls you on your back, or if you pass their half guard into side control, then you win, and then you reset and do it again. But I noticed this one black belt, he's a black belt, so he's good, but he's like literally 17th in the world for his age and bracket. And it took me a while to notice, but he would lay there with his hand already down at his side. And so then as soon as I started, he could immediately get that under my armpit. It's called an underhook. And so with his two legs controlling my one and then his arm under my armpit, he had total control. So, and I realized, I just started laughing, right? Once I realized what he was doing, and it took a while, all right? I'm not always the sharpest knife in the drawer. But I didn't learn it. And I realized he's stacking the odds in his favor before we even begin. And of course, being a black belt, and I'm just a white belt, he has infinite knowledge compared to mine, infinite practice. And so he's just so much better anyway, but he still stacked the odds in his favor. He didn't go in sabotaging himself to make it hard, right? He made it as easy on himself as he could. So you need to understand this. You are going into battle. It can be a friendly battle. It should be a fun battle. 'Cause that's the other thing, with jiu-jitsu. As I'm rolling with guys, guys that are my own rank, even guys that are a little bit higher, some purple belts, some blue belts, and I make a good move, they don't get mad. We're talking to each other. We'll be nodding. A lot of times we're wearing mouthpieces. Sometimes it's a little hard to talk. But there's one guy I roll with, Gmo. He's a smaller guy, blue belt. But he'll nod and kind of grunt, like, mm-hmm. So basically admitting that I made a good move. We want to be challenged. And so over the last year, he's gotten me a bunch more than me because he started before me. But I'm bigger than him, and as my skill improves, I'm getting him sometimes, and he's getting me a lot less. And we welcome the challenge. He just nods and grunts and smiles. But all the guys do that. Like, hey, good move. Mm-hmm. Oh, that was good. So it's the same in business. When you're dealing with a tough opponent, but you're doing it in a controlled, professional manner, putting in a little humor, it intrigues them. They appreciate the effort. They like the dance. They like the courtship. They like the choreography. They recognize that you are a professional. You've got to go through this and do this. Okay? Memorizing trial closes, the alternative choice close, the Benjamin Franklin close, whatever. I mean, yeah, sometimes, I don't want to say never, right? Sometimes you might need that, but it's just so rare. If you set things up properly, just set them aside. You won't need them. Okay, because like he says, when you own the frame, you are positioned to reach an agreement with your buyer. Okay, like he says, think it's not possible? I do it every day for the simple reason that I want to serve my buyers well. I can't do that if I'm continuously engaged in a frantic chase for new business. I think I talked about this on a podcast, an interview. But I know I've brought it up in the Make Every Sale course. And you see it, like right now, we're getting our house painted. So a new example of the same thing. But we got one quote for like $4,200. My wife got another quote, and she got it for like $3,200. So we're going with a lower quote. And so we'll see how it works. But this guy that gave the lower quote, it was, say for simple math, it's 25% less. So he needs to either have 25% lower costs, or he's going to have to sell 25% more and do 25% more work to make the same amount of money as the other guy. Okay? So you need to understand that you are not necessarily serving your clients and doing the best work if you let them beat you down on price. When you stick to your guns, when you control the dialogue, control the frame, control the pace, control the conversation, when you're the one asking the questions, okay, you're going to get to the truth. And it may be the first time that your prospect has ever verbally acknowledged the truth, their pain and the ramifications, the cost of that pain. And when they do, they'll appreciate the skill and the professionalism it took for you to pull that out of them. And when they say they have a $50,000 problem and you have a solution, maybe you were going to do it for $5,000, but now you offer to do it for $10,000, but you fix a $50,000 problem. Isn't that worth it? And if you got $10,000 for a job you normally do for $5,000, won't you do a little better job? Won't you send them a little mint, right? A little handwritten note, maybe a Christmas card, maybe, I don't know, a box of chocolates, a cheese box, maybe enroll them in a wine of the month club for a year. And what will that do for you in their mind? right? A, B, C, D, E, attract, bond, convert, deliver, endear. So now you can deliver exceptional service. Now you can treat them better. Little cards, little pieces, little nice thoughts, little gestures. And that endears you to them. Now that attracts more business to you because they're going to give you referrals and testimonials. But it's because you control the frame. All right? Because you were able to find the true pain, charge enough money to solve their pain and still have a positive ROI and pay you what you're worth. You've got to do it. Okay? So he says here, a quick review. A frame is the instrument you use to package your power, authority, strength, information, and status. Everyone uses frames, whether they realize it or not. Every social encounter brings different frames together. Frames do not coexist in the same time and place for long. They crash into each other, and one or the other gains control. Only one frame survives. Just like Mad Max, right? 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. Or Highlander, there can be only one. Anyway, all right. Only one frame survives. The others break and are absorbed. Stronger frames always absorb weaker frames, and the winning frame governs the social interaction. It is said to have frame control. He gives an example of a police officer, pulling you over. They have that control. They own the frame. All right, but now he gets into power frames, time frames, analyst frames. You're going to have to get the book to go into this, but it starts on page 28. He talks about power busting frames, time constraining frames, intrigue frame, and then he talks about a fourth frame. I already mentioned it, but that's the prize frame. In the analyst frame, that's you. This came up last week in the Make Every Sale course. Somebody was asking about like a DISC profile, which I get into, and your steady relators or your compliance. The ones that read the manuals. There's always one of those in every meeting, or the details will come up, and that is just that cold cognition, right? You're not going to get excited, getting down to the bowels of some software or some offering, but it will come up. How you control that is critical. And hey, I have always had a problem with them. And again, I'm kicking myself in the butt. It's so easy to counter. And I'm just kicking myself for not taking the time to create my little story, my rebuttal, to handle those and easily disarm these analysts. You've got to do it. You've got to understand how to keep things hot, how to keep the cold at bay to move things along, okay? So he gets into this, the power rituals, the power frame, what you do with it when you go face to face, because you're going to be cornered, right? You're going to be, put into a corner, these beta traps. I had this happen with me, and, I didn't read this book. I hadn't read this book back in, 2005, 2006 maybe when it happened to me. I was still selling those computers out of that startup out of Austin. I go into a meeting with an IT director, takes me down to the basement of his hospital in Vegas. And the guy never looked up from his laptop. He took me to his office. It was just us. And I let him go a few minutes. And I realized what he was doing. I couldn't put words to it like, this is a frame control. I just knew the guy was a jerk. He was being rude. He wasn't treating me right. And I'm not one to beg. And so I sat there quietly for a while. I realized he was just totally absorbed, lost in what he was doing. Didn't even know I was there. I just got up. And I said, look, clearly, looks like I caught you at a bad time. Hey, you got my card. I'm up here, pretty often. Maybe we can schedule another time to meet when it's better for you. I walked out the door. So he talks about that. What happens there is talking about getting a moral authority. Which can trump a lot of things. The guy realized he was being a jerk. And I don't care how big and bad and tough you are. Deep down, when you're not doing right. And so I gained the moral authority in that relationship at that moment. And I've always told my clients and students in the Make Every Sale course and all my training is that my goal is not to teach you lines and make you a robot, make you a little miniature Wes. It's never been the goal. I've always said the goal is to give you the courage and the confidence to stand tall and be present when these intense moments pop up in a prospecting and networking and sales and negotiation situation. Because when you're present, you'll remain calm. And when you remain calm, your expertise is allowed to just flow and come out. Because you are good enough, right? Now, I'm assuming you've done what you're doing for some time. You know what you're talking about. You represent a good product. You have a good solution. It's valuable. If you can just remain calm, you'll be okay. You'll be a heck of a lot better than freaking out. I was always this way in school. You know, I still to this day, I like going to bed early and I'll wake up early. And I had friends, you know, they would always cram. And I was always better off just going to sleep. You know, had a big test. It's like, I'm not going to learn any more by losing sleep. I'm better off if I'm rested, if I'm fresh, and let the knowledge come out. Look at the test, look at the questions. A lot of times, teachers will give away the answers to, you know, question 10 has already been answered in question 5, right? Kind of look around, but by being present, by being calm, by being observant and attentive, you can figure that out. So I just want you to stay calm in the moment. And Oren really gives you that framework to help you set things up, like my black belt friend who has his hand down in the right place before we even start. Set this up so it's unequal. So, and in your favor. You know, in the military, we talk about going in with overwhelming force. You know, if the enemy has 10,000 troops, you don't show up with 10,000 troops. You know, you show up with 100,000 troops. You know, and you bomb them from the air and you bomb them from shore for days and hours and days and weeks ahead of time, right? You send in your SEALs, your special operators to blow up their communications and their bridges and their transportation ahead of time so they can't retreat, you know, and then you get them to wave the right flag, the white flag, right, and quit before the fight even begins. And I've said this before again, you know, the purpose of the military is not to destroy the enemy. It's to take away their will to fight. That's what you're doing here. You need to take away your prospect's will to fight and have them say, you are the best choice. You have uncovered my pain. You have discovered the truth. You speak the truth. Here, take my money. Take my 10 grand to make my $50,000 problem go away. That's what you're getting into. Okay, he starts with the prize frame, page 37. You are the prize. You know, we've fallen into this trap thinking, oh, it's just a commodity. I've got to do what they say because I have dozens of competitors locally. I have thousands of competitors around the country, around the world. I got to really give in. No, you don't. You know, I sell Infusionsoft. I sell HubSpot. There's literally thousands of partners that do what I do. You can buy it direct from these companies. You can buy it through other partners, thousands of partners. And while that's true, what you don't get is me if you buy it from someone else. You don't get my unique mixture of being a father, being a husband, being an Air Force veteran, being an entrepreneur myself, being experienced in copywriting and sales training and automation. So I bring a unique twist, unique flavor to the engagement. So see yourself as that prize. You need to understand the value that you bring. If you don't understand your value, you're going to struggle. You're going to let them push you around, just like this painter. Right? My wife pushed them around. She got a better deal. Now, I sure hope these guys are licensed and bonded and don't set my house on fire or fall off the ladder and break their leg and we get sued. So we shall see. Maybe we should have paid the higher price. You know, we're about to find out. But you get my point. Could the first guy we dealt with, could he have done some things better? Could he have endeared himself to us? Could he have asked better questions? You know, maybe he should have dealt with my wife and me. Now, it's true, you know, women in the households make somewhere around like 80% of the buying decisions. And this is my wife's deal. And you know what? She could paint this thing psychedelic pink. I don't care as long as she's happy. So I did not have to be there. But if I was there, he might have connected with me in a different way. Maybe he connected emotionally with my wife, logically with me, Maybe vice versa. All right, my wife's super practical, but she's passionate about getting the house painted. So in this case, even though she's super practical and logical and frugal, we all make decisions emotionally. He probably should have gotten us both in the room to go over the quote and then positioned himself as being different, as being better, as being worth $1,000 more. Maybe he is licensed and bonded. Maybe he has some other guarantees. Maybe he does some kind of touch-up down the road. Maybe he uses better tarps for taping things off and on and on. I don't know, right? But he didn't do that. You got to know this stuff going in ahead of time. You've got to understand the value you bring, or you're shooting from the hip. You're going to sound like the competition. You're just going to be in trouble. And then you can only compete on price. And when you do that, it's a race to the bottom. Okay? And it's not going to end well for you. So how can you get things to end well for you? He tells a story of an avocado farmer, and you need to go read that story. His client had been taken literally in a Ponzi scheme for $640,000. And he talks about how he just barged in and took control. He talked about frame control, about he calls it the moment of contact when two big, tough frames collide. He talks about plowing. You know how once you get that momentum, kind of like jiu-jitsu, just like rugby, just like football, when you have that momentum, you plow through them. You keep moving. You keep pounding the ball through the gap, okay? The same gap over and over and over until they stop it. And once you have momentum, you have them on their heels, you'll still win. It's the same in jiu-jitsu. You get that initial move, you get the person falling backwards, you get on top, you stay there. It's the same in business. It's the same in selling. It's the same in pitching. Far too often we let up. We're too kind. We're too nice. We think, oh, well, I kind of proved my point. You know, I'll be a little nicer, give them a little breathing room. And if you ever do jiu-jitsu, you'll learn. You give them an inch, they'll turn that thing around. Next thing you know, you're on your back and you're tapping. You need to close the deal. If you want to be nice, then at the end of the deal, let's say they want to pay 3% and you're negotiating for 10, and then you finally crush them and they agree to 10. At the closing table, you can agree to 9 or to 8 or to 7. Right? You can be benevolent. And he talks about this in the book, talks about not overusing your power, not abusing the person, especially in a group dynamic where you want to take control and then dish out, share that social status. So it's kind of similar. But I've heard stories, and I forget exactly who it was. It was like some type of like a Japanese billionaire, super successful entrepreneur, and he would do the same thing. He would negotiate a tough deal, but then give a little bit back. And, his protege asked, why did you do that? And it was basically that the gist of it was to foster goodwill. He said, I want people to know that I'm fair to do business with, that it's a pleasure to do business with me, that it's profitable to do business with me. He said he'd rather get, 100 deals and earn, for example, 9% commission than get just 10 deals at 10% commission. So you can let up once you have total control. And I think, and I know too many of you are not, that's not your goal. You just want to be nice. You want to be liked. You want to do the chit chat. You want to be friendly. Zig Ziglar and David Sandler, they'd call you a professional visitor, a professional networker instead of a salesperson. You've got to take control. So you need to understand these frames. You need to understand the analyst frame. You need to understand the moral authority frame. You need to understand the timing frame, the prize frame. This will not just come to you. Okay? But in this story, he talks about his hook point. He just gives a classic example, very detailed, of how his frame absorbed the other. How he kept his foot on the accelerator and almost literally kept his foot on the throat of this guy to get his client's money. And this dude ended up going to jail, him and his father. So it was very interesting. Just as luck would have it, last night, I was talking with a consulting client of mine. She's haggling a big deal, and she talked about how she lost control of the time, and that put her behind the eight ball. I mean, there's no other way to look at it. You cannot appear needy. You cannot appear like you have all the time in the world. You cannot appear and come across as though you're not in demand. And so her prospect said, they had an hour meeting, or at least she thought he said they had an hour meeting. She set a 30-minute meeting. When they got on the phone, he said his next meeting was at 4:00. And so some things might have gotten lost in confusion, in translation here. But she said at 3:35, he said he was late for his 3:30 appointment. So something happened there. There's some miscommunication, or he didn't like the way things were going. Now, she admitted they had had multiple conversations. The thing she had going for her is that he had already paid a retainer for an audit, right? A deep dive. I do this with my initial process assessment, my IPA, thesaleswhisperer.com/IPA. Too many people, you go for the jugular on the first call. When you have an appointment, the appointment is really to see if there's a fit, and the close is for some sort of diagnostic, some sort of assessment, just like bringing your car in and you pay the $79 or $59 or whatever to have them hook it up to the computer. If you can't close a prospect on $200 or $500, when I was selling computers, like the story I talked about selling in Las Vegas in that hospital in the basement where that guy was ignoring me. We sold $50,000 and $100,000, $200,000 computer systems. But I would always close. My goal was to sell them on a $1,500, what we called a try and buy. If I couldn't get them to spend $1,500 to pay for some equipment to be shipped to them for 30 days, and it also paid for an engineer to come out and spend a day and hook it up and train them, which was worth way more than $1,500. But if I couldn't get them to put a little bit of skin in the game, then I was going to have a tough time selling the big deal. So, that's part of the make every sale concept. Make these baby sales, these baby steps, and move the sale along. So, like I said, fortunately for her, she had already done this. Now, she was still afraid to talk about money. And in the 7 deadly sins of selling, number 5 is you're afraid to talk about money. The guy had already paid $1,000. Do the assessment. Now tell them what they need. Is your auto mechanic afraid to tell you, hey, you need, a new transmission. Hey, you need a tune-up. Hey, you need, rebuild these cylinders. Hey, it's $500. It's $5,000. Hey, it's $2,500. Are they afraid to tell you that? No. You should not be afraid to talk about money. You've got to tell the prospect what it is they need. And lay out your prices, lay out what they get, and then shut up. And let them make a decision. So we went over that last night. She was asking me for a template for one of my proposals, and I wrote a blog post yesterday about how when you create a proposal, only 3 things can happen, and 2 of them are bad. And, proposals are not fishing expeditions. She was fishing. A proposal should be a written summary of what you've already agreed to. That's why I have a 90+% acceptance of my proposals. It's not that I write magical proposals. It's just that I don't just throw them out like chum, going deep sea fishing, hoping something will come up. I only send a proposal when we've had a meeting of the minds, and then we need the written, scope of work, the written agreement to confirm everything and get started. She didn't do that. So I recommended that she just send a quick email to the guy outlining basically a silver, gold, and platinum package. Show what's included and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking. Here's the various pricing. So before I spend too much time on this, where's your head at? What do you think? Happy to discuss this one more time on a quick call, and then we can formalize things and get going. Because otherwise, she'd have literally spent hours and hours and hours on this proposal. Take the guesswork out. Okay? Stop assuming. Assume nothing. That's another one of the 7 deadly sins of selling, the assumption malfunction. Don't assume anything. Ask the hard questions, get the answers, and then you can both proceed, without any mutual mystification. You got to clear things up. So again, with this time frame, you need to be pushing things. You need to let the prospect know you're not there at their leisure, for their pleasure, at their leisure, right? You got other things to do. You are in demand. You are the prize. And so you do that by controlling the time. In the book, he talks about how a prize frame is greater than the time frame. So if somebody uses a time frame on you, you turn it around and you become the prize. If you had an hour meeting, and you show up and they say, hey, before you get started, Wes, I just want to let you know, we've only got 30 minutes. I'm sorry, something came up. And you turn around and say, oh, that's okay. Something came up with me as well, and I've only got 20 minutes. And he gives an example of that exact thing in the book where those guys went back and forth from 30 to 20 to 15 to 10 to 12 to 8. And I think they ended at 2 minutes. But like I said earlier, like in jiu-jitsu, guys don't get mad when someone puts a good move on them. They appreciate it. Iron sharpens iron. If you're dealing with someone that's pulling that trick on you, they will not get angry at you playing back with them. And if they do, that is fine. They are jerks. They are bullies. They will continue to lie and manipulate, and it will not be a pleasurable outcome. So it's better to know that early. I always tell people, hearing no early is a victory. I'd rather know in the first 2 minutes that I'm dealing with a jerk and we end the meeting than have that delay and go on and on and on for weeks and months, doing proposals and everything else, only to find out later what a mess it is, So understand how the game is played and be willing to play it, He gets into the intrigue frame. He talks about how relationships can trump price. Relationships can trump analysis. People that just want to beat you down on all the speeds and feeds and the features. So relationships are important. But when I talk about earlier how he mentioned in the book, the chit chat and whatever, you don't need to do that in the beginning. Until I know you and trust you, until I see that you bring value, I don't really want to do all the chit-chat small talk. Bring value. Let me know there's some chemistry, that you're a professional. Boom. I'll let down my hair a little bit, let down my guard, and we can talk a little bit. We can talk about sports. We can talk about fishing. We can talk about family, whatever. And so I'm not saying don't do it. I'm just saying check your order of relationship building. We've always heard people buy from people they know, like, and trust. The main thing is they have to trust you. Then they'll get to know you. Then they can like you. But the main thing is trust. You've got to bring that value. All right. So you've got to understand how to build intrigue. If you ever dated much, you should be good at that. But the intrigue frame is great, and he calls it the most effective way to overcome the analyst frame. I've created my own story for that. We talk about that in the Make Every Sale course, where you should be joining us. Like I said, I could literally read this entire book. I'm only on page 56. We've gone an hour and 18 minutes. I could go for hours and days on this. You need to check the book out, and you know what? Hit me up online. Hit me up on my page at the Sales Whisperer on Facebook and ask some questions. And I'm going to get Oren back on and have him on the show. I think I don't think he has another book out, but I know he's got a course out where he goes through this in more depth. I apply a lot of what he's doing. I already had been doing a lot of this, fortunately, early in my career. I've been doing some of this since reading it. Some of it I forgot. It's like, where did I learn that? I don't know. But as I reread this, I realize I was applying a lot of its principles. Now I'm reapplying and accelerating my use of it. So, I apply this and teach this in the Make Every Sale course, where we also get into a lot more things, though. Get into websites and email sequences and marketing automation and SEO and landing pages and copywriting and headlines, because all of this comes into play. He was in a different line of work, and it was a little bit unique to him how you grow your business and really how he does it now, right? He wrote this book in 2011, telling about his stories from 2010 back to early 2000, maybe, somewhere around that time frame, late 90s. So he's using social media now. He's using videos. He's using Facebook and paid ads. So you have to evolve with the times, but the underlying principles remain the same. the intrigue, the time, the prize, the analyst, the power frames, the fact that there are frames, how you've got to have that hook point, how you have to negotiate from a position of strength, how you can never be boring. That's the number one sin of marketing. So are you bringing all these to bear? And who is it that's helping you? Who is your Sherpa, right? Who is the one helping you navigate the mines and the pitfalls and the treachery of business and of life? You can't do it alone. I don't do it alone. I'm in masterminds. I have coaching. I work with experts in different fields. Always have, always will. So that's why I invite you to join us to continue the conversation on Pitch Anything. Join us in the Make Every Sale course. There's a monthly option. You can enroll for a year and save 2 months. There's a 1 year, 365-day money-back guarantee, so I put my money where my mouth is. So why don't you join us there? MakeEverySale.com, where we will help you pitch anything. And now, go sell something.